The violin was developed in the 1500s, evolving from a series of guitar-like instruments that musicians played with a bow. While it's best known for classical and gypsy music, its influences stretch to rock, country, folk, bluegrass, and jazz. First, a piece of maple is cut, then split in half to expose the grain in mirror image. Glue flakes made from animal hide are melted down, then the pieces are bonded together. Violin makers use only glue, never nails or screws. These pieces of wood will form the back of the violin. After 4 hours, the glue is dry and the clamps are removed. Using a small plane, the surface is evened out. Then the violin maker traces the violin's shape and cuts it out. The surface is shaved, sculpting a downward slope in the middle using an even smaller plane. Then a groove is carved along the circumference. After dabbing it with glue, the maker inserts what's known as purfling, a reinforcement made from a thin strip of hardwood, usually maple. Finally, the reverse side is formed. Next, the sides of the violin are made, known as the ribs. Thin strips of maple or sycamore are soaked, then pressed against a heated bending iron to curve them. Then strips are glued around a form, connected at the top and bottom corners with small blocks of wood. Everything is clamped together, allowing the glue to dry for 4 hours. Next, thin strips of wood, called counter ribs, are glued onto the edge of the ribs. This enlarges the surface so that it's easier to glue the ribs and the back together. The violin's front, or belly, is constructed from a solid piece of spruce. A support bar called the bass bar is glued to the underside. Sound escapes through 2 curved slots called F-holes. The violin's neck and scrolled head are carved from a piece of maple. Which is then glued to the body. The fingerboard is sculpted from ebony, a hard wood that's durable enough to withstand centuries of violinists' fingering. Using a tool called a peg-hole reamer, the violin maker gouges out holes for the ebony or rosewood pegs around which the strings are wound. The wood is coated with 4 or 5 coats of varnish, depending on the colour, and is polished with several coats of oil over several days, until the finish is shiny and silky smooth. Next, the sound post is inserted. This little pine cylinder conducts sound and supports the belly against bowing pressure, so it's critical to position it in precisely the right spot between the belly and the back. It's not glued, but rather wedged into place. The bridge isn't glued either. It's held in place by the pressure of the 4 strings, which they feed through the ebony tailpiece and wind onto the pegs. The bridge has little notches in which the strings sit. The violin is now finished. The bow is made from horsehair and a high-quality Brazilian wood called Pernambuco. The hairs are bound at one end with strong sewing thread, then burnt and sealed with wax to prevent fraying. This end goes into the frog, the wooden box at the bottom or heel of the bow. The frog is covered with a mother-of-pearl lining. Then a ring made of nickel, silver or gold is slipped on to prevent the hairs from tangling. Next come the screws that control the tension of the hairs. The hairs are combed to make them parallel, then inserted into the tip of the bow, known as the head. The screw is tightened until the hairs are taut. Finally, rosin, a sticky tree resin that keeps the bow from slipping off the strings, is applied. However, this won't stop beginners making a sound like a wailing cat.